Welcome into episode 225 of the Skate Podcast. I'm Brian DeFelice, joined by Bridget Prue and Scott McLaughlin. Bridget and Scott, if the Bruins played the Rangers all preseason, they'd be undefeated. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. They had about four other opponents in there, but they finished the preseason strong with a 3-1 win over the Rangers in Madison Square Garden. And the game-winning goal was Matt Patra. Yes?
Yep.
So just, the icing on the cake for his preseason, and he continues to be the main storyline throughout camp. And now that preseason is officially over with the games, there's only one thing left to do, and that's make it official.
Yeah, and it's really hard to imagine them not at least giving him at least the opening night spot and go from there. And, I would keep him through the whole 9 games that you get to keep him before you burn a year off his entry-level contract and make a decision then. Like, you don't have to decide right now if he's going to be in the NHL all year or get sent back. You have this almost like extended tryout that you can give him. So you might as well. He's clearly earned it. He's been pretty consistently one of their best players when he's just about every game he's played. The only one he maybe wasn't was the second night of a back-to-back, and even that game he ends up scoring a tying goal in the third period. So his goal tonight starts with him winning a faceoff in the defensive zone, and then Trent Frederick and Morgan Geekie kind of going to work on the forecheck, and eventually it's Frederick setting up Patra right in front, finds a soft spot in the defense and buries it. I thought certainly it was interesting to see him get put on that line. We had obviously discussed the possibilities where he could go, and I think the two options were second line with Marchand DeBrusque or third line with Frederick and Geekie, and he gets put on that Frederick Geekie line. I thought they started slow, like really slow. I don't think they had a single shot attempt halfway through the game. But just as we saw when he was with Marchand and Frederick, they kind of picked it up the second half of the game and got some chances and eventually the goal.
Yeah, and even that goal you mentioned in the third period of last game, it's a highlight reel goal. Like, that was a beautiful goal that he scored. And it's one of the things that people, when you're thinking back, if you're putting his body of work together for the preseason, you're looking at that goal and you're going, okay, he saw that he had a lane to the net and he took it. And one of the main criticisms for him coming in was that he's more of a playmaker than a shooter. He's more of a passer than a scorer. And he has more goals and assists in this preseason. So he kind of quieted that. If you're talking about, what does he need to work on? Shooting more. He has shot every time he had a chance. I mean, he's really proven that he knows when to pass and when to shoot. I think he's proven himself. And I know there were a few comments made by the broadcast had Montgomery on and Cam Neely on, and they both had quotes that were a little bit more telling than stuff that they've said to us in media scrums and whatnot. And one of the comments was Montgomery to Darren Pang on Mason Lohrei. He said, he's going to be part of our future. The only question is it October 11th or sometime later this year, which is more telling than anything we've heard about Lohrei. And then Neely, speaking in the first intermission, said, we told the guys there's spots that are available to earn. And he named Patra, Lohrei, and Beecher and said, we wanted to get another look at them so that to see if they could crack the lineup. It's always nice to have a hard decision. We want to know if they can handle an 82-game schedule. So I feel like both of those statements by coach and management show you that this has been something that they are seriously considering, even with Lohrei, who is someone who's further in the depth chart just because of how strong the D-core is. So I think Patra has clearly shown he's ready and will be in there. I think Beecher has had a good preseason. I think he should start there. I'm not sure if he will. Lohrei, I think they're very seriously considering him as well. So I think no matter what, if you take away from preseason that they're all close to ready and you have these prospects that are right there if you need them, is a good thing. And it's a positive sign.
Yeah, it's a very positive sign. The Bruins have been knocked for in recent years for their lack of internal prospects, and in just a matter of a few short. I don't want to lump it all just to this preseason because Patra was on people's radar last year and in juniors, and Lorai's, people are watching him in Ohio State last season, and Lysell obviously has been a name, so it's not like people are totally caught off guard. But I think certainly, I mean, with Beecher, it kind of seems like the timing is right. He's 20, 23, maybe 22. I mean, played NCAA, had some time in Providence. Like, it kind of makes sense, like, that he's making a push now. I think we all expected him to at least try to vie for that for the fourth line at some point this year. Patra is the one where it's just like he just seems like he's a couple of years earlier than anybody anticipated. And it's an incredibly pleasant surprise. Lorai, yeah, it's because look, if the Bruins didn't have Hampus Lindholm, I think maybe there's a stronger case to maybe force a kid into the lineup. But because the Bruins decor is certainly set to start this season, I don't see them necessarily rushing him on opening night. But as I've said on previous episodes, like, I think he's going to be a part of this decor at some point this year, if it's not opening night. So to your point, Bridget, yes, it's there's a lot of great things happening with these prospects and some very impressive camps out of these kids.
Yeah, just quickly, just to push back a little on the Patra shooting thing. I will note that he has 3 goals on 4 shots this preseason, so he is not going to shoot 75% for the year.
He's picking his spots, Scott. Come on. Like, this is what I'm saying. He's picking the spots. Like, you can't criticize him for passing when he needs to pass and shooting when he should shoot. It's 75%. That's because they're smart shots.
Yeah, I will say if he can keep up that efficiency, then he'll be one of the greatest players ever. So that'd be fantastic. But yeah, no, all 3 have certainly been impressive, and it does feel like Lorai is. We've kind of kept saying, I think everyone's expectation is, well, he'll start in Providence because they're deep, and no point to rush him. Like, let him play there, and he can be the first guy called up. And I still think that's how it will go, but they are clearly giving it serious consideration to keep him for opening night. And if you think about it, it's not like there wouldn't be a spot for him. Like, if it bumps Derek Forbort out of the lineup, or like even Kevin Shattenkirk, if one of those guys is the 7th defenseman, I think that's a good problem to have. Forbort certainly hasn't lit the world on fire this preseason. Neither has Shattenkirk. So, I'm of the mindset that those guys are veterans. They've been here before, and I'm not going to panic just because they didn't have the best preseasons. But, when you're talking about competition, it's like Montgomery he's made a few comments throughout this preseason about veterans not really playing like with the desperation he'd like, or whatever, or intensity that he'd like. And it sort of feels like, that's almost like a message to some guys of like, don't think your job's totally safe. Like, you still gotta win it. Like, you still gotta go in and compete. And every veteran will say that, but it's almost human nature though. Like, if you've been there and you've been in the league a while and you think you have a roster spot pretty safe, maybe you do kind of let up. Maybe you do sort of ease into it. And, I kind of wonder if that's caught up to a few guys who now might be in battles that they didn't really think they were going to be.
Let me just say, if you're a bottom pair defenseman, your position is in competition, right? You shouldn't just be like, I'm a veteran. Like, you're in the bottom pair. You're always going to be on the cusp of fighting off either, a younger guy that's Mason Lorai coming into the lineup, or even just like someone else that, like Forbort and Shattenkirk, they have Lorai to worry about Ian Mitchell. They've had different guys throughout training camp push for those spots. So even at a point, Callahan looked good. So and Zaboral, like those guys are all coming for your bottom pair. And so Forbert and Shattenkirk, I know they're veterans, and we kind of gave them last episode and previously kind of give them a pass for not having a good preseason because, they're veterans. They go through the motions. The young kids, they're not going through the motions, and they're making you look bad. And so Lorai has outplayed them. And if the message to them was what Neely said, is that spots are up for grabs, and if you play hard enough, you get them, then they've done everything they can, and they've done the right thing. And those guys kind of took their spots for granted. Forbert. Shattenkirk, I feel like we didn't see a lot of.
He only played 2 games.
Yeah, so I feel like him, I'm not really sure how to judge him in preseason because we didn't see him a lot. And he's a little slower. Like, he didn't make a huge impact, but Laurie has been someone that we obviously had an eye on because he's a prospect and he's made a lot of his opportunities. So I don't think Forbert or Shattenkirk should feel safe. I don't think, and then there's Ian Mitchell and Laura. Like, there's plenty of competition for that bottom pair.
Yeah, and the last thing I'd say about like Laura potentially making it is, that would likely mean that both Zaboral and Ian Mitchell get waived, and I'm fine with that. Like that wouldn't really bother me. I don't think Zaboral's really popped at all this preseason or even in training camp. Ian Mitchell, I think, had been making a strong push. I don't think he made a good final impression. I thought he struggled tonight. So, he's, as I've mentioned before, like had some tough games in Chicago, has played 82 NHL games. If Laura starts in Providence, I like having Mitchell around. I like that depth on the right side, but I don't think it's like essential that you have to keep him. And I'm not sure he'd get claimed on waivers, so you can probably still have him in Providence. But yeah, and like another guy I think about is like, was he a little too comfortable to start? Was Morgan Geekie, who we talked about before. Like his roster spot was always going to be safe, but he started camp kind of slow. He started his first couple preseason games slow, and all of a sudden, here comes the last preseason game, and he's not the third line center anymore. He gets bumped over to wing, and finally has a strong game to his credit. Like I thought he played well. Ends up with 2 assists. As I mentioned, like was part of the forecheck with Frederick to set up Patra's goal, and then makes a nice play to set up AJ Greer for the empty netter. So, finally brought it, but it's like, did it take this push from Patra and, the threat of moving over to the wing to sort of light a fire under him? Because now it looks like he's most likely starting the year on the wing and not at center, which I think is good for the Bruins. I think it creates a deeper lineup all around. But it's obviously not the role he probably initially thought he was going to have.
Yeah, and somebody else who might not have the role they initially thought they may have because of Matt Patra is Charlie Coyle. And I think he played like a man who had something to prove tonight in Madison Square Garden as well. He had the power play goal, out-muscling Adam Fox in front, which, Coyle versus Fox, you're going to imagine that's going to be the case. But stick on the ice, big body in front, and then, got a little bit of a love tap from behind from Jimmy Vesey and decided to, take matters into his own hand and kind of just have a little scuffle, which isn't necessarily Charlie Coyle's MO. Like, he's not the type of person to necessarily just like not like a hit and I just drop the gloves. Like, clearly there's a little added edge there for him tonight. And
I don't know if they had. Do they have history? Do they have history in college or something? Like,
no, I think they skate together in the summer.
Yeah, like I don't know. Like, it felt like there was a little extra. I mean, they said there was a triple minor. Like, Coyle, even though he did get kind of a cheap shot, at least the way he saw it, like his face hit the dasher, and it was for preseason, there's no need to do that. So he was mad and he cross-checked him, slashed him, hooked him, Jimmy Vesey, and ended up in the box a 4-minute power play for the Rangers. But like they technically, I think they called 3 minors on Coyle in the same sequence, and you just don't see him get like that. But he caved in VC with literally just grabbed each other and Cole just like put him to the ground. It wasn't really a fight, but he had a goal in a fight technically in the same period, and you don't see that from him a lot. And it was good to see his passion, I guess. I don't want him fighting though.
Yeah, and then
it's the last fight he should ever be in.
And then he took another cross-checking penalty in the third, so he ends up with 2 cross-checking penalties and 2 roughing penalties. So I think he already blew the Lady Bing. He's not winning that this year.
Can you lose that in preseason?
Yeah, it's gone.
Does preseason count?
But yeah, I mean, on a more serious note though, I thought Charlie Coyle played really well. I thought that line, him, Marchand, and DeBrusque, even though they didn't score 5-on-5, Coyle's goal was on the power play. I thought that was their best line for the vast majority of the night. And yeah, I do think, maybe Coyle felt a little push there of, hey, Paja's making a push, and not just to be on the team, but potentially to be a top 6 center. And Coyle played like someone who didn't want to move back to the third line. He wanted to stick in the top 6. And I think because both of those lines found a little bit of a groove tonight, I feel like that's probably how they're going to start the season. Coyle with Marchand and DeBrusque, Poitras with Frederic and Geeky. And I think that's fine. I think that, I made the case last time that I think Poitras, putting him with Marchand and DeBrusque, better utilizes his talent as a playmaker. And I still believe that, but I also think there's validity to, keeping him away from top matchups to start, protecting, sheltering him a little bit and kind of seeing how that goes. So I get both sides of it. And the fact that both those lines found a little bit of chemistry tonight, kind of just adds to the case to, hey, let's start with this and then go from there.
Yeah, I'm totally fine with that to start for the exact reasons you said, Scott. I think long term, I see the offensive upside of Poitras on that second line, but to everything you just said, it's very true. There's no reason to necessarily opening night demote Coyle down to the third line. Let Poitras get. Now, obviously, it's possible he gets a 9-game trial, and so you might want to see him be put in a position to showcase what he can do. And does Geeky and Frederic allow him to do that necessarily? No, but you know what though? If he's good enough, they'll keep him around. And I'm just looking forward to the season because it's not often that the Boston Bruins have a teenager in their lineup. So I mean, the last time you can see that would be Tyler Seguin, and before him, I want to say Lucic's rookie year. Maybe Kessel was, but he came out of Minnesota, so probably not. Maybe Sergei Samsonov, Joe Thornton. It's not very often that they have teenagers in the lineup. So I don't know if I had that on my bingo card at the end of last season going into this season. So the fact that this is a reality, it's pretty exciting. So he might start in the third line, but either way.
Yeah,
I mean, Pastrnak is one when you missed.
Right,
but
sorry.
Yeah,
well, it's him too. Yep.
But yeah, I think that was probably. I mean, McAvoy was a teenager when he came out, at least for that playoff run. I'm trying to think if he was still a teenager that next season.
I was going to say it wasn't a full season. It was coming out of college for him.
Yeah, but when did he turn 20? It might have been during that next year.
I mean, we don't really this is kind of semantics. Yeah.
It was he turned 20 December of that first full season.
Okay.
But out of camp though, McAvoy didn't make it out of camp as a teen. I don't think Pastrnak did either. I think Pastrnak went to Providence first.
Right.
Poitras would be, I think, since Sagan, the first one to make the team out of camp outright as a teenager.
Yeah, I think that, it's much less common for them to just come straight out of camp. And he has it a little bit in his favor that he doesn't have the option of going into the minors. Because of his age, it kind of forces their hand a little bit more. And not only that, his play has forced their hand more than anything else. But if he doesn't make the team, I promise you I'm going to write a very scathing op-ed on weei.com because he needs to be in this lineup. I don't care if he's on the third line. I don't care if he's on the second line to start. You'll find where he fits best in time, where his chemistry is, who he plays well with, what his strengths are, what his weaknesses are, but he needs to be in the lineup on opening night. He needs a 9-game trial. And if I'm if I'm guessing, he's going to be there after the 9 games. Like, he's played well enough that I know you're like, oh, he's 19. Oh, you could convince yourself, and I'm not convinced, but people have convinced themselves he could benefit from juniors. Just let him play through it. You don't have a crystal ball. None of us have a crystal ball. He could be a huge addition to this team. He could help the team out a lot. He's going to have his hiccups, sure. There's guys around him that can teach him, maybe cover up his flaws a little bit, and he needs to spend time in the pros learning how to make those plays at NHL speed, shoot against NHL defenders, and everything like that. Learn how to kill an NHL power play, like be on the penalty kill, but like let him do that all at the NHL level and figure it out, because he's figured it out so far. I trust that he can still learn and grow. So I want him in the lineup day one, and I want him there after 9 games. I think he's going to just continue to prove everyone that he's supposed to be there.
Yeah, I mean, I do think the concerns about like how is he going to hold up physically, I think that's legitimate. Like, I don't dismiss that. I mean,
that's like, but you haven't seen it yet. Like, that's my thing.
Well,
you haven't seen
well,
it.
I know, but you've seen plenty of other smaller play. Let's remember, he's 5'10", 175. You've seen smaller players before who wear down. I mean, Fabian Lysell wore down in the AHL last year.
Yeah, but I don't know how we can just apply that to him. Like, I'm not willing to apply that to him.
I'm just saying, like, he could go back to juniors and get stronger. It's hard to put on weight and muscle during an NHL season. Most guys tend to lose weight during the season.
It's easier now with the training staff they have there. Like, I trust a pro training staff to get him on the right diet and workout routine to bulk during, like, and to add weight and to do it in a way that you're not like making yourself slower. But the Bruins have the right people around him. I'm not willing to just like apply. I understand why people say it, but like, I just don't think it matters at this point. If he's one of your top 3 centers, you're not just going to send him away. Like, if he could be a solution for you on the 3rd or 2nd line, like, he's not even on the margin. Like, he's in the middle.
So I have a question. So, Scott, let's say that this was a Chicago Blackhawks podcast. Would you be saying the same thing with regards to Connor Bedard? Or would you say, well, he's such an exceptional talent, I would make that exception, but he's still a human, so like you still have to worry about the 82 games and losing weight throughout the season because he's a smaller player.
But Connor Bedard's a generational talent, so I don't care about it in that case, honestly.
Well, why don't you just take my argument?
But the talent, he is a generational talent. But my point is, it's like it's still an 82 game schedule, like, and you don't want somebody to like get worn out or get hurt if they're physically not mature enough yet, like outside of the talent. So, I also think that if this was 10 years ago, certainly 20, I'd be like, no, this kid's gonna get eaten alive. But the NHL in 2023 is not the physical grind it was in the past, just because it's a younger player's game. It's a younger kid's game. And I don't think it's as difficult on the body from a physicality standpoint. It is from a conditioning, but as far as like getting beat up every, in the corners every game, and it's a little bit of a different, you can get away with it easier nowadays is what I'm saying.
Yeah. All valid. And it's honestly like there's the physicality on the ice. It's also, it's all the flights, it's all the travel. It's just the grind of NHL games every 2 days.
Come on, Scott. Don't be a hater.
I'm not.
He can get enough sleep, right?
I think I've been very clear for several podcasts now that he is a lock on my opening night roster.
Okay, so the problem is you don't think he's going to last past 9 games? Is that the problem? You don't think he's going to last past 9 games?
I have no idea. I want to see how he does.
No, Scott's just looking at it from all angles. He's just saying, that's all he's saying.
I'm not committing to him for the full season yet. I'm committing to him for opening night and several games, hopefully 9 beyond that. And
I am. I
see,
just want to
and
go
see
on
how he
record.
does.
I just want to go on record as I am committing to him for the whole season, and maybe I'm right or maybe I'm wrong, but that's my take right now. So we can circle
Okay.
back at some point,
So-
but that's my opinion.
What if by game 7 he's getting buried in his own zone, he has 0 points, and his minutes are down to like 10 minutes a night?
And what if he has 3 goals and 3 assists in his
Then
first
then
9
great.
games?
Then fantastic.
Great.
What
Okay.
what is it about this situation, Scott, that he can't report to Providence at all? And can that change if he sticks with Boston longer than 9? Can he go down to Providence at some
Age. It's
No.
purely age.
It's the agreement that the NHL and the Canadian Hockey League have, where somehow the CHL, which for people who might not know, runs the OHL, the Quebec Major Junior League, and the WHL. Somehow they have enough power that they've been able to negotiate this over a long period of time that players under 20, players who aren't going to turn 20 until I think it's like January 1st or later, have to either stick with their junior team or go to the NHL. And it's basically been their way to fight like NHL teams just taking all the good 18-year-olds out of juniors and putting them in the AHL. I've never really understood like how the CHL has had that much power to keep this in place for so long. And I know there's been talk, and I heard, I don't know if it was on tonight's broadcast or one of the other games, but someone pitched the idea of like, should NHL teams be able to designate one underage player a year that can be eligible for the AHL? And like, I think even that change would be good, because it just is odd to me. It's like the best thing for Matt Pacha's development could very well be some time in Providence. So it's like the fact that you can't do what might be best for some players' development is bizarre to me. So I would like to see that change, at least, that you can say, set a date. Maybe it's by October 1st. You have to decide which player you're designating or something. But the Bruins could say, we're designating Patra as the one under 20 player that, we can put in Providence or something like that.
Yeah, and for the just to clarify, he isn't eligible because he doesn't turn 20 until March.
Yeah.
So the cutoff is January. He turns 20 in March. So most of the season he'll be 19 if he sticks in Boston.
Yeah. So even if he stays beyond the 9 games, there's no, if the Bruins want to send him down, it would still be to juniors. It wouldn't be to the AHL. There's some ways around that. There's like, he can get injured, and people watching on YouTube, I'm using quote fingers here, and you can send him down for a conditioning stint. You can also like work agreements with certain players. Like occasionally the CHL will be flexible, which happened with Shane Wright, where Seattle was able to move him between NHL, AHL, and even major juniors. He did all 3 in 1 year when he was under 20. And that was because they got some sort of exception granted. So
sounds like politics.
Yeah.
Like some serious politics going on.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's a good explanation. I know myself benefited from it, and I'm sure maybe some of the listeners too. So the 3 of us have another episode to do before the regular season, where we're going to break down the Atlantic Division, Eastern Conference, and maybe just some league-wide predictions. So I think for this episode, we're just going to kind of keep it to what has been in the preseason and anything lingering from this Rangers game. And Scott, I know you wanted to maybe discuss some final thoughts on maybe Boquist, and see if he may have wiggled his way into a 13th forward spot, or anybody who may have made an impression that otherwise going into tonight they may have been on the outs.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned Ian Mitchell as a player who I thought kind of had a tough game to close out an otherwise strong preseason. So interesting to see if he had already done enough and banked enough good performances Jacob Zaboral only played 2 games. He did not play Thursday, which I kind of thought he might. I thought they might try to get him into a 3rd game. So interested to see what happens there. Might not matter at all if Mason Lohrei makes the team, and then neither one of them makes it. Jesper Boquist was on a line with Pavel Zacha and David Pastrnak. Had a couple shots, but otherwise I thought was pretty quiet once again. And Jim Montgomery on Thursday morning reiterated that he thinks Boquist has been practicing well, which is something he has said all camp, but admitted it hasn't translated to games, and they wanted to see it translate to a game. And if it's not really translating when you get a chance to skate with Zacha and Pastrnak, like I wonder if he's done enough. We went over it on our last podcast. I already had him out. I don't think he did anything tonight to get back in. Like I think Danton Heinen had a better preseason. I think Jacob Lauko had a better preseason. They signed Boquist as a free agent, so obviously they had some hopes for him, but I don't know that I've seen enough this preseason for him to make it. AJ Greer ends up getting an empty net goal. Other than that, I thought had a quiet game. Don't know that he really did anything to break in. And Patrick Brown, I'll say I thought that entire 4th line struggled tonight. It was Greer, Beecher, Brown. I just didn't really think they did much of anything. I felt like Brown was the one who still had to try to do something to win a spot back from Beecher. I think we were all giving Beecher the edge anyways, and I didn't see anything to change that. In fact, to reiterate, like our point from last podcast, Lucic, Beecher, Lauko looked like a good 4th line in Tuesday's game. So nothing I saw tonight would convince me that there's another 4th line option that's better.
Yeah, it's kind of weird when you have 2 guys on the same line competing for the same spot. Like, how does that make you compete? Like, how do you approach a preseason game when the guy on your right wing is the guy you're trying to beat out for 4th line center? Like, how
send them suicide passes?
Yeah, like you just send them up to get like nailed. Like, I don't know what you like. Is there do you just play to try to make yourself look good and hope he messes up, or do you set him up for failure? Like, it's such a weird dynamic in preseason. But the main point is that the last preseason game, the 4th line was way more effective with Lucci, Beecher, and Lauko. This 4th line that they rolled out tonight, it didn't feel like what they want for a 4th line, and it also did not perform as what they would want for a 4th line. It's not what we would have put together. I don't think it's what the coaches would put together on opening night, but they wanted to get one last look at a couple people, so they kind of patchworked together certain lines, and I think that's why Boquist ended up where he was, because they're like, we need to give him one last look, even like we might not be 100% sure. Brown, we're going to give another look, but I think they know what they got out of Greer. I think they're really leaning towards Beecher making it. At this point, I think he's earned it. It just becomes whether or not they're willing to waive guys that are not on 2-way contracts, and see what happens. But of all of preseason, I think you guys would agree the most effective 4th line was Lucci, Beecher, Lauko as a combination.
Yeah, agree.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if we're just like overreacting to seeing like only such a small sample size.
No, I mean that's what you get in preseason though. Like,
sprint.
You're not going to get 5 games with the same line mates. So
it's also a combination of, it's not just that those were the better performers. I think on paper they're the better players anyway. So it's also like they just have all things going for them. Like Beecher,
yeah,
I think
and they work better together. And they okay, Beecher and Lauko have speed, which Lucci needs to like help with the forecheck. And they kind of played off of each other the right way. And I see that as a good 4th line. I think that that's their best option, but they're stuck in a tough situation, and they said, it's good to have like competition and to make it hard on you. But at the end of the day, you're making a decision based on guys who've worked their asses off in preseason. And we all know who's worked harder than others. And then you have to try to explain to someone say like Beecher, if you send him down, like you have to explain to him, oh, you outplayed this person, but we sent you back down to Providence, which it happens in the NHL, but it's hard to tell someone in the beginning of camp the job's up for grabs and then say, just kidding. Like you can go back to Providence.
And I think the Bruins have had their fair share of humble pie throughout their 99 years heading into this one. 2019 stands out, but also last year. And I think that the Bruins are just like, you know what? We're just like whoever, guys that earn it, they're going to get their opportunities. Like there's no more. It is what it is. Last year was a different situation. It was a very established team. This year, I think they're trying to get rid of a little bit of a stink in that locker room, and I think some new blood and new faces. By the way, players that have earned it through camp so far are going to get their opportunities, and these are players that the Bruins drafted. Like they drafted Johnny Beecher, they drafted Matt Patra, they drafted Lauko. Like these are guys that they want. You don't draft players with the intention of them not having an impact in your organization. It looks good on the Bruins if these players can become something, and they've earned it. So it's like, why not reward Johnny Beecher because you want to stick Patrick Brown, who hasn't done anything in camp? It makes no sense. So I think we're all on the same page. And as I said, we have another podcast to discuss some lingering storylines, and we'll discuss the final roster heading into the regular season. So Bridget and Scott, did either of you have a final talking point from the Rangers game?
Just a quick note. So we're recording this right after Thursday's game went final. While just a few minutes ago, while we were recording, Kevin Paul DuPont, who was in New York, said post game, when I asked Montgomery if Patra made it impossible for the Bruins to deny him a spot on the roster, Montgomery said, "Yeah, I mean, it certainly looks that way. He's earned the right to stick around for a while, that's for sure." So he's in, at least for opening night, which we all expected. Like he's clearly earned it, but there you go, straight from Montgomery.
Yeah, and they kind of been more cryptic about it throughout preseason, and then today it felt like they were willing to put it out there nationally on the TNT broadcast, and then obviously the beat reporters that were able to travel, Kevin Paul DuPont, the one getting that quote, like I think they feel really confident with him, at least as their decision. Their tough decisions come with Heinen and Boquist and Greer. Like those are their tough decisions.
Yeah, and to your point, you didn't name Patra as one of them because he was so obvious. So, closing thoughts from either of you?
No, we should could be multiple rounds of cuts, but they've said they want to get down basically to their opening night group by some point this weekend. So, definitely should be coming in the next few days. See them get down into that 22, 23 player range. As of Thursday, they had 29 players. So 6 or 7 cuts coming.
Yeah, I think all I'll say is me and Scott are both preparing different articles to write between now and the start of the regular season, because there's kind of a big gap in between Thursday night and then they don't play again till Wednesday to open the season. So there's a lot of time there. So we're both working on different things we're going to post. And also we are trying to either get Patra or Lucci for a one-on-one interview between now and the start of preseason. So we're putting in for that. Hopefully should have a podcast where somebody is available to us for a player interview.
Yeah, and Monday's media day. So there'll be, along with all the players in Montgomery, Cam Neely, Don Sweeney, and Charlie Jacobs all holding press conferences. So I'm sure there'll be some stuff to react to that we'll discuss next week as well.
Yeah, so even though there's not another game, there's still a lot going on.
All right, well, everybody buckle up, put on your black and gold seatbelts, because we got quite the ride to go through this year. So as always, thank you all for listening, and we will talk to you very soon.